Bro, come on. Smile. Part 2. All right, whatever. Hey, I'm gonna need you to chill over there, all right? Smile 2. Written and directed by Parker Finn, Smile 2 is the sequel to, you guessed it, Smile 1, or just Smile as it's called. The surprisingly awesome 2022 psycho supernatural horror thriller that took the world by storm and left us all with creepy little smiles on our creepy little faces. No joke though, the original is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. The obvious terror in having an ever-growing and powerful monstrosity stalking its victims in an I'm never giving up on you, it follows kind of way, but instead of sex, it latches onto its victim through the ever so subtle art of foreshot viewing of a random suicide, paired with the symbolism and subtext about that movie's main issue, which is trauma, and how it's something that those unfortunate enough to have to carry through their entire lives until they face their demons.
I'll just bury it down inside.
Bury it deep down in there and never bring it up again.
To me, it is just a fabulous setup and premise for a horror movie overall. I really enjoyed the performances and cinematography of the original, the acting, the jump scares they had were good jump scares and not cliche bad American jump scares. The nods to the past horror films are some of the things that I really enjoyed. For instance, there's the part where the monstrosity in the form of Rose's therapist takes Rose by the face and pushes her. Bro. She takes Rose by the face and pushes her up against the wall. You get that cut of her like drooling. That's straight up a nod to Ripley and the Alien from that franchise. I think it's one of the coolest shots in the movie on both fronts. So things like that, the original did, Parker Finn did, that I just think were awesome, especially considering that was his feature film debut after the success of his short film, Laura Doesn't Sleep, which is what Smile was based off of.
Heard about this incredible short film, Laura Hasn't Slept.
Are you certain you're not dreaming right now?
And that's why that actor kind of reprises her role in the beginning of the original Smile. Because at first, I didn't think the original was going to be good. I thought it was going to be a cliche movie. We've seen movies circling around this idea of a creepy smile. It's a trope that goes back to The Man Who Laughs. Of course, you have the Joker and the clown It, things like that. Wide, weird, offsetting grins are nothing new. But the thing that this movie did that made it so good and different was attaching it to the so-called monstrosity, the smiler, the trauma demon. Such an unique experience in this movie. I thought it was really, really good. So I was super stoked, but also super scared. You know, it might do that thing that a lot of horror movies do, especially in America, when they get a little bit of success, is kind of implode in on themselves. As we've discussed before, sequels are just hard to do. It's hard to outdo something that was really celebrated, especially when it was, in my view at least, an original concept like the original Smile was. The thing about sequels in horror that makes it even more difficult is horror is all about the unknown. The excitement comes from not really understanding what is going on and what is going to happen. Why is everything doing what it's doing? So this sequel we're walking into, you know, we know the premise, we know the monster, we know the setup, we know the rules, we know that the monstrosity, the smiler, is out to set these trauma bombs all over the place and try to latch on to whoever's next. So really what these sequels have to depend upon, especially in this one, is the story going to be good and believable? And are the acting chops really up to par? So this brings us to our protagonist of this film, which departs from kind of the more down-to-earth, relatable Rose in the original one, who was, you know, just your average therapist, just your average person, and now enters the world of wealth and glamour that the normies like you and me will just never get to understand or experience. I mean, they're called the 1% for a reason, folks. So at first we're like, well, I don't really know if, you know, I'll be able to bond or empathize with this pop character who is just like straight up giving off Lady Gaga vibes, in my view anyway. That's all I saw every time they cut to her doing whatever pop performance she was doing. But the actress Naomi Scott does such a good job of bridging that gap that we really do empathize and sympathize with her and her part of the story, because at heart, she is just your normal kind of person that is dealing with her own trauma, her own drug and alcohol addictions, and her past traumas with her ex, and et cetera, et cetera. No spoilers in this video, but she does does a great job of bridging that gap for us because the fear she exudes in the film is so palpable and we all can kind of relate to it. So what's so interesting about the evil trauma demon monstrosity in the Smileverse is how it can make you go from a quote unquote sane person to completely insane by week's end at most, right? So its ultimate power in doing this, it's the power of hallucination. It literally can make you think you're somewhere else and you're having a conversation with someone and it's been minutes, when in reality it's been hours, or vice versa. So that's really the power of this trauma monster. And I think it's interesting because those of us that have experienced trauma or sadness in our life, that's kind of how time works. When you're suffering with that kind of thing. Just to be a little vulnerable, I suffer with depression. And those times when you're depressed, it feels like an eternity. And it might only have been a couple minutes or a couple hours or a couple days. And those more pleasurable parts of life are when you're having fun. I mean, we all know the phrase, time flies when you're having fun. So it's interesting how the trauma demon kind of uses that as a power in the movie, that it can literally just change the way you see, view, and feel, experience reality. So it latches onto whatever, whoever, because of whatever suppressed emotion, trauma they may feel. It's exemplified and exponentially multiplied by viewing someone else's horrible, horrible suicide. So basically what I'm trying to say is I was really scared that Smile 2 would not live up to Smile 1, and I was pleasantly surprised that it was able to keep up with its first iteration. The way that the writer-director Parker Finn ups the ante in this one, he toes a fine line. There's almost a point where it's like, you think maybe he's overdoing it, but then they draw you back in and make it a little bit believable as far as you can in this kind of universe. That said, the bigger and creepier scenes in the movie, I felt were there. So there's like two distinct scenes in the movie that I was like, man, that's good. That's creepy. I'm not going to give it away. You'll know when you see it. But I was like, man, that's really cool. I really like what he did there, how they upped that ante. So I won't say it's better, but I will say that I do hope there is a part 3. And again, no spoilers, but the way it ended, there could be so many different roads that Parker Finn takes that could make this into something incredible in part 3. The few drawbacks I think that the movie had, at least in my view, is it did run a bit long. The runtime was 2 hours and 12 minutes, which is incredible for a horror movie. Even the original Smile was 1 hour and 55 minutes. And I enjoy a longer movie. I don't think that necessarily is bad, but I do think it lingered in some parts unnecessarily and maybe padded the time when it didn't need to. So if you want to be a 2 hour and 12 minute horror movie, that's great. That's awesome. Just make sure for a reason. You know what I mean? That's just me though. Let me know what you think. It could have just been the angle I was sitting in the movie theater, but I do think there is one kind of CGI sequence that I think they could have either spent a little bit more time on or made a little bit more practical. That's what was so cool about the original Smile, is when they show the monstrosity at the end, it was actually made using mostly practical effects, which horror movie lovers always like more practical if you can do it in a more practical sense and don't need CGI.
And so for some of these specific effects we had in the film that I wanted to pull off practically, I wanted to go to these guys that in my eyes were legends.
Again, it could have been just how I saw it in the movie theater, if that makes any sense at all. So good things again, acting, cinematography. Naomi Scott did a brilliant job. The few drawbacks, a little long, and maybe a couple CGI things that they should have been more practical with. But overall, what's the flick's real value? The real value of Smile 2? I deem it's definitely worth a watch. It is a fun movie. I think you'll have a good time with it. It's worth seeing in the theater as well. On a Scaredy Cow scale, I give it a solid 3.5 Scaredy Cows for its creepiness. Its jump scares that were in it were good jump scares, and I have a love-hate relationship with jump scares. If they're done in a crappy way, a cliche American horror style way, I'm not for them, but the jump scares in Smile 2 are actually done in a good way. I'm gonna have to do a video over like the differences between jump scares, a good jump scare and a bad jump scare, so I can give you a better glimpse of what I'm talking about in that kind of area. But yeah, I think that it was a fun movie. I can't wait to watch it again, and let me know what you think after seeing it. Do you agree with my takes? Do you have any other takes of your own? Let me know how you feel about it in the comments below. Thanks for stopping by. This has been The Real Value. I'll see y'all next time on the Flippity Flip. And don't forget to always stay real. and smile. Are you done being loud? Oh, you loud that whole video. Man. Try to record stuff and now you want to sleep. Butthead.